Well, you just saw Canada's Commissioner for the Environment and Sustainable Development in that clip, and Jerry DeMarco, we're happy to say, joins us in studio this evening. Jerry, good to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, this is not the first time that you've raised an alarm about Canada being behind its own committed targets, but this time around you're focusing in on the 2030 emissions reduction plan, and you say, again, this country is going to fall short. What's behind that?
So they're going to fall short if the plan remains as it is, but there's still time for them to improve it and make the target. So we don't want to give up yet. The problems with the current plan are inappropriate assumptions, being a bit too overly optimistic about the projections in the plan, and also the lack of timeliness. So a lot of these measures that are in the plan or are projected to be used to meet the target are taking a long time to produce, and they don't result in emissions overnight. So the longer they take to be produced, the longer it'll take to have the emissions drop.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so overly optimistic, as you say. What about the coordination amongst departments? Is everybody taking this as seriously as you would hope they would?
So that's been a problem in Canada for some time now, the lack of coordination and leadership in implementing climate commitments. So we've got a lot of different departments, each playing a part. Environment Canada has the lead, but they don't have the authority to require the other departments to toe the line. So without that stick, if you'd call it that, they can just hope that they're going to get the cooperation from the other departments, but there's no way of being sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say there is time to get things back on track, and part of that, if I look at my notes here, is about leaning in on the carbon pricing regime as well as regulations. But as you know, right now there's a debate, and there are many Canadians who don't believe in the carbon tax, who think it is time to get rid of it. What impact would that actually have on Canada's targets in terms of cutting emissions in this country?
Yeah, so the carbon price and regulations are the two big ticket items for reaching the goal. If one were to remove one of those, it would have to be replaced by some other large measure to meet the target. So we've said that this plan is better than previous plans because it does have measures such as carbon pricing and regulations that have the potential to work, but they still need to tackle the elephant in the room around spiraling oil and gas emissions and transportation emissions. Those two sectors are drowning out the progress in many of the other sectors. Okay,
let's pick up on that then, because it was very clear when you talked about your report that you're still looking for the oil and gas emissions cap. You're also looking for clean fuel regulations. When you say that is erasing the progress that is being made, just how significant of contributors are they, and has that actually grown proportionately through the years?
Yes, so the proportion of emissions in Canada that are attributable to those two sectors, oil and gas and transport, is half. So it's, even though we track 7 or 8 different sectors in Canada, half of the emissions are just from two, and those two sectors have been growing as a proportion over the years. They've been growing as a proportion and in terms of absolute emissions as well. And so therefore they're erasing, for example, excellent progress on reducing emissions in the electricity sector. But the other two sectors are, as I said, drowning out that progress.
Okay, so something we're going to have to track from the government. You are also calling for greater transparency overall when it comes to this country's carbon regime. Talk to us about where transparency is, how it's lacking, and how being more open about things will actually help progress in this country.
Yeah, so this plan is more transparent than previous plans that have failed to meet targets. So it's better than those, but it's not good enough in terms of transparency. For example, we wanted to look at their figure for reducing emissions in oil and gas, which they had in the report as 31%, but we didn't have access to the calculations and the modeling that would come up with that, and therefore we can't verify if it's realistic or not. So a big step in the right direction would be Canada becoming much more transparent in the figures behind the plan and whether they add up.
Okay. I'm going to play a bit of a devil's advocate, if you will, on this, because I appreciate what you're saying here, is that right now we have this commitment to reduce carbon emissions by 40 to 45% by 2030. But the government does point to some progress, because by their own calculations, they're looking at 34% below 2005 levels. Why is 34% so close to 40? Why is that not sufficient?
So the target is a minimum of 40%, preferably up to 45%. 34% is what they're projecting so far from the measures in the plan. Is that good enough? Well, in one way, it'd be better than previous targets that we've missed by even more. But I don't think we should be that unambitious. We should set a target and make it. It's not that difficult. Other G7 countries have diminished their emissions much more rapidly than Canada.
Can you add some context to that when you say that Canada hasn't fared as well as other countries? Put that into context.
Yes, so since 2005 to now, which is the baseline year that we're using under the current international framework, Canada has the lowest level of emissions reductions, but at least there's some reduction since 2005. Since 1990, which is the original baseline year from when the world got together in Rio to create the Climate Convention, Canada's emissions are still up from there. So think about that, 30 years of working on reducing emissions, and our emissions today are still double digits higher than they were when we started. No other G7 country is like that. All of them have at least some reduction.
So work to be done, but as you say, it's still possible.
It is.
Jerry DeMarco, always appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.